Alright, so the objective today is to differentiate between several hacking techniques. So this is a really fun lesson in my opinion. So let's start with this. Using simple hacks, a hacker can know about your personal unauthorized information which you might not want to reveal. Knowing about these common hacking techniques such as phishing, DDoS, clickjacking, etc. could come handy for your own personal safety. So outside of just proving to me that you've learned these concepts, these are some things you need to probably remember for the rest of your life so you can guard yourself against hackers. So I start by saying unethical hacking can be called an illegal activity to get unauthorized information by modifying a system's features and exploiting its loopholes. In this world, where most of things happen online, hacking provides wider opportunities for hackers to gain unauthorized access to the unclassified information like credit card details, email, account details, and other personal information. And notice that word right there, unclassified. Just because it's unclassified doesn't mean it's not important. But if it is classified and you get that information, you can find yourself immediately going to prison, especially if we're talking about classified information that is relating to the security of our country. So needless to say, hackers are looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. So think right here, what is a vulnerability? So the first one I want to go over, at least the first hacking technique I want to go over, is something called a keylogger. A keylogger is a simple software program that records the key sequence and strokes of your keyboard into a log file on your machine. These log files might even contain your personal email IDs and passwords. A keylogger is one of the main reasons why online banking sites give you an option to use their virtual keyboards. Now personally, I've never seen that, but I do know that my web browser will automatically fill in either the username or the password or both, and thus that stops a keylogger from working. However, that could create another vector for an exploit. But a keylogger can begin in a really simple way. You can get something called like a rubber ducky. It looks like a USB device, or it is a USB device. You just plug it in, and it can track the keystrokes you're making and send that to the hacker, which can then be used to get into places you might not want the hacker to get into. And apparently there's two types of these keyloggers that a nefarious person can use. The next hacking technique is something called a denial of service attack. This is used to take down a site or server by flooding that site or server with a lot of traffic that the server is unable to process. And if the server can't process these requests in real time, what you see is it crashing or not responding to your requests at all. For DDoS attacks, hackers often deploy botnets or zombie computers to flood your system with request packets. Your think right share here is to Google famous DDoS attacks and tell me what you find. There's one that happened to me in my past that I'll never forget because it happened on Christmas. It's the Christmas I got a PS3 and I couldn't get onto the PlayStation Network because Sony had been getting a DDoS attack from the famous hacker group known as Anonymous, or at least a group claiming to be anonymous. And some of these groups like the Chaos Computing Club or Anonymous, both of these groups are famous for hating capitalism and hating rich companies like Sony. So sometimes the point is just to make them angry because they're successful capitalistic companies. A good way to think of DDoS is it's like 200 people calling one number. A simple denial of service attack is like one person repeatedly calling your phone. It's a nuisance and stops you using your phone, but you have a chance of tracing the person and blocking them. A DDoS attack is like someone anonymously placing a press ad, including your phone number and offering an Aston Martin for sale for $200. You're bombarded by calls, your life is misery, the callers aren't aware that they're a part of a trick, and your attacker is almost impossible to trace. That's what the whole zombie computer or botnet is all about, is other people's computers being used in an attack and they're completely unaware that they're a part of this trick. So that's why it's a good idea to try to monitor the traffic coming in and out of your house. Now, if you're a big fan of Discovery or National Geographic channels, you could relate easily with the water hole attack. To poison a place, in this case, the hacker hits the most accessible physical point of the victim. For example, if the source of a river is poisoned, it will hit the entire stretch of animals during the summer. In the same way, hackers target the most accessed physical location to attack the victim. That point could be a coffee shop, a cafeteria, etc. Once hackers are aware of your timings, they might create a fake Wi-Fi access point and modify your most visited website to redirect them to get your personal information. And that's what a watering hole attack is. So think right, share. What's your watering hole? And you'll need to tell me what websites you go to the most for that to work as well. And to wrap your mind around the effectiveness of a watering hole attack, there was this one in 2012 that affected 500 companies, all within 24 hours. And speaking of numbers, the average time a hacker is inside of a system before anyone realizes that is roughly around 200 days. And that's pretty scary. So maybe the scariest of hackers are ones where you don't know that they're already in your system. And check this out. In 2013, after the Untitled Attacks, we found a Flash player exploit on a caregiver website that supports Tibetan refugee children, this Tibetan Homes Foundation. It turned out that this website was compromised in order to distribute backdoors signed with stolen certificates from the Untitled case. This was a classic case of a watering hole attack. The cybercriminals had researched the preferred sites of their victims and compromised them in order to infect their computers. We saw the technique used again when code on the Central Tibetan Administration website started to redirect Chinese-speaking visitors to a Java exploit that dropped a backdoor. And if you didn't know what a backdoor is, it's just a way to get into a program. And this is all information from a Kaspersky article I read online. And that's so frustrating. I said here, why? Like, why are people who are kind giving money to Tibetan refugee children being exploited? So sometimes organizations, small businesses like nonprofit businesses, even human rights groups are targets of hackers. And sometimes these hackers aren't just after money. It says here that an attacker was able to infiltrate a targeted organization's network. Once they do that, they can initiate attacks that are harmful to the organization's operations, which include modifying or deleting files with crucial information. So your think right here is make the connection. How could deleting files or changing them in any way help an attacker? I'm asking you to think of the motivation behind such an attack. And if you don't want to use one that you came up with on your own, think about this situation. Who would want to harm Tibetan refugee children? Use your imagination and come up with a good answer for this. Think right, share. Almost done here. So there's another attack called a fake WAP. Even just for fun, a hacker can use software to fake a wireless access point. This wireless access point connects to the official public place. They will use software to fake a wireless access point. This wireless access points will connect to an official public WAP. Once you get connected to the fake WAP, a hacker can access your data just like in the above case of our watering hole attack. Another attack, eavesdropping. This is considered a passive attack. Unlike other attacks, which are active in nature, using a passive attack, a hacker can just monitor the computer systems and networks to gain some unwanted information. And the motive behind eavesdropping is not to harm the system, but to get information without being identified. Our next one is a phishing attack. This is where hackers replicate the most accessed sites and traps the victim by sending them what's called a spoofed link. Once the victim tries to log in or enter some data, the hacker gets the private information of the target victim using the Trojan running on the fake site. And so here I think this picture says it all. They create a fake site and you enter your password. Now they know it. And that's the number one reason you don't want the same password for every website. Or at the very least, maybe you can have a password for social media sites and then a very strong, huge, random password for important sites like credit card or banking websites. All right, here's one of the most creative ones. It's called Clickjacking Attacks. Clickjacking is also known by a different name, UI redress. And in this attack, the hacker hides the actual UI where the victim is supposed to click. In other words, the attacker hijacks the clicks of the victim that aren't meant for the exact page, but for a page where the hacker wants you to be. And for those of you out there who know JavaScript or worked with me to learn that, you could see how easily the code on a website can be manipulated using JavaScript to get this clickjacking attack to work. So here I'm just offering up a challenge, think right share. Think back to your HTML and CSS knowledge. What would the code look like that would enable this to happen? All right, and our very last one, cookie theft. The cookies of a browser keep our personal data, such as browsing history, username, and passwords for different sites that we access. Once the hacker gets the access to your cookie, he can authenticate himself as you on a browser. And for many of you out there, that might mean the end of your time on the internet, especially if the hacker goes around and changes the password on all your most important websites. So I like using the Suicide Squad to talk about hackers because often the good/bad guy description is tough. And that is just like hacking. That's why we have black hat hackers. These are the bad guys. We have white hat hackers. They're supposed to be the good guys. And then if you're an in-between type hacker, you'd be called a gray hat. Just like in Suicide Squad, you had some guys who seemed good and then some guys obviously bad and some in between as well. So I came up with this type of assignment. I want you to think of each of the attacks we had went through and then connect that technique to one of the Suicide Squad villains. So we got keylogger, DDoS, watering hole, clickjacking, cookie theft, phishing, and passive attacks such as a fake wireless access point or eavesdropping. So think of those techniques. Think of who you have here in the Suicide Squad. And I know I only have 6 up here, so if you want to fill in this table for me using those 6, I think that'd be a great way for you to remember each of the different techniques, or at least some characteristics of each of those different techniques. Well, that's the end of our lesson. So given this list, I want you to reorder these techniques from most serious to least serious, and then finish off the day by answering the essential question: why must ethics be considered when dealing with hackers?